I don't know if you've noticed, but a movie and a novel are two different mediums. You shouldn't be writing stories that read like a movie. Writing that is too cinematic is not necessarily a good thing, even if cinematic writing sounds like a badass compliment. The experience a reader gets from a novel is entirely different from the experience a viewer gets from a movie. Cinematic writing sounds like a good thing, but when you dig a little deeper, it actually becomes a problem and means that you, as a writer, are not taking advantage of one of the biggest advantages of your medium. Reading is meant to be a fundamentally different experience from watching a movie, and you need to approach how your story is written with this in mind. The written medium has some distinct advantages over something like the stage or film. The biggest one being the exposure that the reader receives to the interior life of the character. Most written stories give us access to the interesting bits of a character's head, including things like their thoughts and their emotions. While you can get that with visual mediums, written mediums have this in spades. If you write in a way that misses this connection, if you write in a way that is too cinematic, then you risk missing one of the important advantages that the written medium affords you, which is not something you can afford to do. This is not to say that film or stage or any sort of visual medium can't be emotionally engaging. It's just they get the emotional engagement from different places. One of the reasons that a visual medium like a movie can create a strong character connection by just showing you cinematic visuals is because there is so much more communicated when you see another human's face. This makes up for the lack of interiority that you have with these mediums. You don't have that in writing because writing is a highly abstracted way to convey information. And no matter how good you are at describing someone's face, it does not compare to seeing an actor on the screen. Fixing this is not just about adding in character thoughts. That's a part of it, but there is a lot more to this. You have to change how you move through scenes and what you focus on. Descriptions and dialogue need to be approached in a different way. Avoiding cinematic writing requires an entirely different approach to how you write. There is a long list of things that I have struggled with as a writer, and I think cinematic writing is probably near the top of this. You may or may not know that I recently started publishing some of my writing on Substack, and the novella that I most recently posted on there, Quiver, I think suffers a lot from writing that is way too cinematic. I think if there's one major flaw in that piece, it's the fact that we don't get enough interiority on the characters, and that's something that in my newer writing I'm trying to fix as much as possible. If you want to read that novella, you can do so for free by subscribing to my Substack. The link will be in the description. So let's talk about what cinematic writing sort of looks like. We can describe John clinging to the side of an icy mountain with trembling fingers as freezing rain pelts him and a perilous drop into the black abyss stretches down below him. The frigid wind that blows against him as he girds himself into the mountainside. We can describe the jagged icicles clinging to the 3-day stubble dotting his immaculately sculpted jawline. That's a very striking cinematic description of John, who for the moment is averting the kind of fall that turns you into the consistency of warm jello. But that description doesn't quite go deep enough. That shot, that scene would work great in a movie, but in order for the written version of it to convey as much emotional depth, we need to change things up a bit. We need to make the writing less cinematic. Cinematic writing is writing that lacks three fundamental things. Interiority, which are thoughts and feelings of the viewpoint character that are directly communicated to the reader. Cinematic writing also lacks character reactions, which arguably are just more thoughts, but are also thoughts that are tied to the action happening in the narrative. It is how that action is affecting the character, which is the third thing that cinematic writing lacks. It lacks a description of the effects of the scene on that character, what that scene is making the character feel, how it is changing them, how it is affecting them on a deeper level. That's different from a reaction because a reaction is sort of an in-the-moment emotional response to what's happening. Effects are sort of the slightly longer-term changes or realizations that the character is having as they progress through the scene. You'll notice that all of those points specifically center around the viewpoint character, and that is a key point when it comes to getting rid of cinematic writing. The only place where you really have a break in a cinematic viewpoint, assuming that you're writing in some sort of limited perspective, is with the viewpoint character. Everything else that we see is technically cinematic except for what we're experiencing through the viewpoint character. This is a big difference between a written medium and a visual medium. It is with the viewpoint character in a scene that the reader has the deepest connection, and this connection is what will fuel your story. Most important here is the thoughts and emotions and reactions of that character, which we are giving the reader access to by virtue of that character being the viewpoint character. Character emotions can be implied in a very cinematic way, but directly reading a character's thoughts only happens in writing. Implied emotions come through things like facial expressions or body language. Implied thoughts might be things like a character reaching for a weapon or saying something in a line of dialogue like, "Hey, hand me that weapon." That's what we typically get outside of the viewpoint character. More explicit thoughts, which we get from the viewpoint character, allow the reader to get closer to that character because we are seeing a level of detail that is only visible from inside that viewpoint character's head. Cinematic writing is very good at showing what is happening. Deeper writing with a lot of interiority tells us why something has happened or why what is happening is important, especially to the character. Cinematic writing is very much about chronicling and relating events to the reader. Less cinematic writing is about getting the experience of the characters in the scene across to the reader. It is far more experiential. Every time an event happens in a scene, your characters are going to react to it in some way. This is another crucial element of deeper non-cinematic writing. A reaction could be nothing, it could be the character ignoring something, but what that reaction is, whether it's delivered through a character's own actions or through their thoughts, that needs to be clear to the reader. Back to John clinging to the side of the mountain for his life. He might be terrified about the climb, he might be unsure if he can make it, or he might not even be thinking about that. Maybe he has to rescue his best friend who's being held hostage at the top of the mountain. Maybe adrenaline is making him not think about the fall onto the rocks that could turn him into something resembling egg salad. Just seeing him clinging and putting out effort to stay attached to the side of the mountain is not enough to get us in the character's head. There's a whole bunch of different emotions and experiences that John could be going through at that moment, a whole bunch of events and things that he could be thinking about that are shaping his experience of that moment. If you don't communicate that stuff to the reader, the writing will be cinematic, it will be a great visual description, but they will fail to connect with it. They won't get engaged in the story. That extra level of detail is what pulls readers in. It's what makes novels engaging even though they're just words on a page. This is what creates intrigue and interest. When I've had issues a lot of the time with critique partners not getting something that I'm trying to convey in a scene, or when I've missed something that I'm in a piece that I'm critiquing, it is almost always an issue with the interior parts of the writing, not the cinematic aspects. Writing fundamentally needs to compensate for the fact that we don't have special effects and camera angles and actors who can get naked in a scene. We have to get readers into the heads of the characters. We have to make the writing so experiential that they are still drawn in, even though they are just looking at black and white text on the page. In order to do that, your writing needs to go beyond the cinematic aspects of your scene. You can't just describe what is happening. You have to get into reactions, effects, thoughts, and emotions of the characters. We really have to get inside their head in order to bring readers in. Speaking of compensating for things, I'm going to compensate for the fact that I didn't write a proper conclusion to this video by just making the conclusion go as fast as possible so people hopefully won't notice. Anyway, so there you have it. I'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions and the effects that this video had on you in the comments down below. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.